Fearless is a mindset, and fear is the mind killer. At least that is what I'm led to believe, seeing how some of our teams drafted during week 1. You'd think they have a gun to their head, but homies, in game 1 of Fearless, it's business as usual. So how the heck are you already messing up so badly? I'm looking at you, BDS. G2 and KC, they are a cut above everyone else, and they're waiting in the upper bracket finals on Monday, meaning that the lower bracket is juicy. Fnatic, they didn't manage to win a game versus G2 despite looking hot to trot all split. Now, I did hear that some players were feeling sick, and that makes sense. They have a bad case of G-flu. G2, however, they didn't drop a game all weekend, also beating GX, but yeah, Giotto just had to open his mouth, didn't he? So this was kind of expected. That, and they're really scared of werewolves for some reason. Those things aren't real, Giant X, just like your chances of winning the LEC.
The perfect team fight! They take it all! Here comes the Crow's storm! It's not back, it's the goal of person! What? This people, oh my god! Claps! Everybody! You know the story, you know the legend!
Well, all in all, it was an interesting first foray into the Fearless draft, and that's exactly what we are discussing here today in Ready Check, as well as pondering the question, do we have a clear top 4, or is it more like a top 3? Welcome, everyone, to week 2 of the Winter Playoffs. My name is Shox, so happy to be back and to be flanked by such extraordinary colleagues, Lore, Finn, and Goldberg. You ready to get into it?
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
Happy to have you back as well.
Well, I'm really happy to be here indeed. And Fearless, I was, of course, watching from home, but what's our first impressions?
We haven't seen much, I think,
okay.
honestly, when you look at how things went.
I mean, to me, that was like a sample of what's to come, you know? Like, this is just a taste of what we're going to see. It was only 2 games per series, so we didn't dig that deep into the pool.
Well, it's supposed to be more.
It's supposed to be more.
Yeah, I was going to say, are we still in our best of 2 system? What are we doing right now? We only saw 2 games every time, so I think we haven't seen enough to really say, oh, this is exactly what Fearless is bringing right now, but I still think that some teams just drafted quite ordinary, and maybe that's a symptom of only having 2 games, or maybe that's a symptom of not being properly prepared for it.
Yeah, that's the feeling I have. I feel like teams are aware of what Fearless draft is supposed to be, but they didn't quite understand the assignment when it comes to putting that in game and getting their priorities straight.
Yeah.
Unless your name is G2, where you just draft Warwick and Swain into the normal meta champions of Ambessa and Cassante. I feel like they're actually embracing the spirit of Fearless, even though they didn't need to.
Well, let me ask you this then, because for G2, right, I think people will look at the Warwick and say, oh, you just like played the Warwick, but their drafts were cohesive from the get-go. But if you're so much better than everyone else, does it really matter? Like, is that really the team that we should be judging the rest of the league of? Probably not.
No, but you should still look at their creativity. You should still look at the spots that these things are coming into, right? The Warwick is a clear Ambessa counter right now that they're willing to slam into it.
Yeah.
We saw the choke off as well, very much targeted towards a Jace. So they have already started scouting. These are the meta champions that we know people will prioritize in Fearless. Here's what we're going to hit them with to just make sure that they can't win with them.
It's true, and they were, of course, very successful with it. Now, as we get into discussion about Fearless and if it really made an influence or had a big influence on the best of 3s and how our teams are doing, I wanted you as my panel to come up with 1, 2, 3 hard rules for a good Fearless draft. Now, spoiler alert, this is probably a draft overall because, so I wonder if you guys can come up with that.
I would go ahead if you
No,
1 to 3 max.
I just spoke, so Finn, you should take it
Okay,
away.
I'll take it. So, I've watched a lot of LPL, and what I see when you come into these later halves of Fearless and the drafts kind of get more crunched, is that what is really important is that you prioritize cohesive combinations of champions in the 1-2. Synergy. So you go for the classics, you go for the Vi Ari, you go for the Sejuani Yone, you go for the Xayah Rakan. These combos of 1 to 2 to 3 champions are very important to secure, because if you have some sort of strong point in your draft, it makes the surrounding draft be much smoother.
Okay. Coherence and then, if you want to think outside the box, you need to draft around a specific champion.
Okay.
If your off-meta pick is going to be the center of the draft, then build something around this that's going to be coherent, because sometimes you're going to draft this one champion that wants to go in, the rest doesn't cook quite well with it, and you end up having something that makes no sense.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just making sure that you have a proper damage type as well. Like, I think in Fearless, when some champions suddenly get pushed out, you can't just say, well, I'm the one who's going to be picking the Yone here if enemy team already did it game 1, and you're stuck with a Maokai or Syra. The AD champion pool in the mid lane suddenly can become very slim, and that's also something that team needs to be aware of.
Unless
Okay.
you're Doinby.
I mean, sure, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, makes sense. This was easier than I thought. I thought maybe you'd disagree, but it's quite clear. So I wrote down damage profile has to be on point. The synergy in your core picks, your 1-2, your 1-2-3, and build a cohesive comp around your one most important, I guess. So if your iconic champion or the one that is most important for your draft, that can also do the most damage in the game, or is it your most important, your carry champ or not?
I mean,
or?
it could be like a Skarner or a Maokai that you
Oh, that
pick
can
really
also-
early.
yeah.
Like
Okay.
you pick a Maokai, so you want to pick zone controlling champions, or you pick a Skarners, you want volatile lanes. Whatever you pick early usually is the thing you're going to build around, because that is the power pick that you secure early in the draft.
Yeah, whoever, a champion that's going to pull the trigger or be at the initiative, or a champion that is going to do the specific setup to shine, which can be your carry.
Okay, I see. Those are cool rules. Let's take a look at some drafts and see if we can find those rules in them. I'm going to start with the game 5 between HLE and T1, because this is like the hardest part of Fearless Draft. You're at the absolute end. You are in game 5. What do we think about these?
I mean,
I
the one
love the
to
Lee Sin ban. For me, that was really, really smart from HLE, and that's the kind of bans that you don't think of, but that make a lot of sense, especially in game 5, when you're playing against T1. On the side of T1, though, I feel like the draft wants to do too many different things.
Yeah, and I think the Olaf pick by Zeus was so clutch, because
Yeah.
you see this low DPS team comp with 2 AP solo laners, making it so easy to itemize for the magic damage early game. And there's just no one in that team comp, unless their Draven is really ahead, they can actually deal with an Olaf in the later fights, and that's what we saw. Olaf just runs in and kills the entire backline. What can a Soraka do when he's unstoppable?
But also looking at like the 1-2 that we're getting, you get Kalista Renata in game 5. That's also crazy.
That's
Having that
crazy.
as the core part to
Yeah.
build your team around. Okay, here's some zoning with the Talia and the Amumu, and then your point still stands with the Olaf. I think that in a game 5, you get dizzy, but you also have to think about what S tier is still available. And if it's not S tier, what A or B or C tiers is it that you're really comfortable on then?
And let me ask you then, what is kind of the difficulty that you see, and maybe I'll start with you, Finn, when it comes to teams drafting in the LEC in Fearless? Because I think we saw some pretty egregious drafts even last week when the team shouldn't be getting pushed yet, right? Technically in game 1, definitely not, but even in game 2 of a best of 3. So what is making them flustered, you think, about Fearless specifically?
Yeah, I think people just get into their own head too much. I think people just see these champions and they think, oh my god, it's Fearless now, we gotta be ready for game 3, game 4, game 5. And that's like, maybe they think they wanna save picks for those games instead of picking the best champions that they can at that very moment. Because when you're a pro player, when you're standing on that stage, your mindset should be, I need to win that next game. I don't think there's space to save champions for later halves of Fearless. You need to pick what's strong now.
But also, it's still only best of 3, so that 4 and 5, you don't even have to worry about, right? Like, it should be super simple. This should be almost like a normal playoffs game if you go into game 2, right? We only had 2 games as well. We never even went to that third, which is where it's going to get even more difficult. I think that it's not really just a symptom of the fact that it's Fearless. I think it was straight up poor drafting from some of the teams going into it, where they made fundamental mistakes that made the game very difficult for them.
I think it's a mix of both. I think it's teams lacking fundamentals, especially for the lower part of the bracket, trying to be creative around Fearless Draft when they don't have their priorities straight in a normal setting, and then it just ends up being a disaster. I feel like that's what we saw for BDS, for instance, when I think of the first draft they played.
Oh, well, I think I got it, that one.
Oh, there you
It's actually game 2 or game 1. I'm not sure which one. This is game 1 specifically, because, I mean, for people who don't know, you're not getting pushed here, right? This is a normal draft.
You're not, and you have Cassante first. You know that they're going to go into Zyra because you know that Elioya loves his Zyra. I just don't know why you would go for Viego. I know that 113 loves this champion, but you know that you're not going to have any agency as a jungler in this draft.
Yeah, the problem is you're drafting a lot around this Viego, but this game, I think the draft is okay. They just really messed up the early game. Because the logic with this draft is that they're going to one-shot one target with the Ambessa and the Rakan ults. Then Viego is going to get a reset and win that fight for them. But when you fall behind so early, this whole plan just falters completely. And I think it was a cool idea to go for, but I think maybe not the time and place to actually execute on that right now. now.
Want to look
good
at my
idea.
rules also, by the way.
Yeah.
Damage profile, 1 to 2, 3 champion core, cohesive around your most important champion.
Yeah.
Is that the case or not?
We don't have it. For
No.
me, we don't have it.
Do we have
because
it on either side?
You're gonna lose the first 2 level and the first trades playing Corki Rakan against Kalista Rel. And for me, from this, what space are you gonna give your jungler, especially on the bot side?
Yeah.
But I still think in a swap situation, it's still doable from 6 as well. Like you have, Mbessa, Viego, and Rakan, like the triple threat that you get from a team skirmishing around that. Very difficult in the beginning. I think the draft, I think it was perfectly fine for them to. I see the ideas with it, but I think like when it came to gameplay, that's where they faltered the most.
I mean, that's tricky, of course, if the gameplay also isn't
Yeah, for
there.
sure.
Again, the argument of if you're just playing really well, then you can make some mistakes, I guess, in the draft. Let's take a look at game 2 immediately in terms of draft, because this is where, if you're already struggling a fair bit, plus stuff that happened in the game in game 1 is also in your head at that point, right,
I
Goldberg?
like this better, though.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I felt like they got pinched the most because they clearly, so in this situation, they're first picking Maokai. This is obviously pick order, but they're first picking Maokai. Enemy team goes Yone. They've already banned away Jace, and in the first game, Corki was picked, as we just saw. So there's a very limited pool of your AD champions available. And while Tristana was played a lot, it was quite evident that once we got into that game 2, Nuke wasn't as comfortable as this pick as he used to be. His first 3 levels was perfectly fine this game, but the moment it was about pressure and they got out on side lanes, I don't think this was as comfortable for him as it could have been in a normal situation.
And then you look over to Movistar Koi, who has the Yone, Sejuani, Nautilus core that clearly wants to fight together around mid, with 2 very, very, very self-sufficient players in the Ezreal who can just catch waves, and the Karma is going to be safe up top, he's going to support as well. So they just really have a clear identity coming into this game. So really great draft by Koi, and questionable, I would say, on BDS.
I still like it. They got a lead early in that game. For me, it's more about gameplay and making decisions in the mid game that went against them in this second game. But again, adapting, like this kind of mistakes in game should not happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the extra layer you peel off probably, right? Because Fearless first will expose kind of if the system that you've been drafting in has always been optimal, or if you have to change it, of course you do, because it's a different system. And then secondly, once that layer gets peeled away and now you're down to your 4th most comfortable champion, not just generally, but also in the system that you have to play in game, right? In the macro game that you have to play. If you're not as comfortable, then that kind of cascades. Is that a way to put it?
Yeah, I think draft is actually quite simple because there's 2 core fundamentals in draft, and it's noticing what is the strongest champions. So that is step number 1. You got to decide what is the strong champion.
Do you have a list as a pro player before the game? Like, is there like 1 to 5?
Oh, there's a lot of differences in opinions when it comes to this, what is strong. But yeah, but that is the first step. You got to define what is the strong champions. And
no, I want to get into this. What's the differing opinions?
I mean, some people don't like to agree when it comes to what is strong. Maybe I say Gabagoo, and then my team says Gabagi. Like you never know. But then, crucially, part 2 of this is that decide: do we want to trade these strong champions, or do we want to ban them? So you got to make sure that you always trade some strong champions or you ban them, because you can't just end up in a position where the enemy gets strong champions and you don't.
Yeah, and you have 30 seconds and you're trying to get used to all this. I know, Laura, you linked a clip from Vitality to us in the caster chat earlier about they were talking about that, and Hillesang was even saying, oh, I think you made a mistake, coach, in the first 2 picks. And he was like, yeah.
And that's the thing, like you need to revisit your priorities, what is strong and what is, if you don't have your first 1 and 2 picks available, then what does it come down to? What is the next one on the list and what is it going to be combined with?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the step maybe that teams were missing this week, this new layer of adaptation in draft, and what is going to be the next priority pick if the other ones get banned, especially in game 2.
Yeah, and I mean, I think especially the link up as well, it's not only just the priority picks in terms of what you're getting on that first, because they also count as bans, right?
Yeah.
Very crucial to remember in Fearless. It's the fact that what you were leading on towards, there needs to be a synergy in your draft with that team composition. I think G2's the one who's been doing it the most, where they're actually not afraid of giving that S-tier pick to the enemy because they know they have a combo available. The Warwick paired up with a Pantheon. I mean, Lot couldn't play the game that game when he had Mbessa. And then when Jace was the S-tier, it was the Cho'Gath, but more crucially, it's the pairing of that Cho'Gath with a Vi where you have that follow-up with the Q. So I generally think that it's really drafting with an intention, and if you're going to be letting us up the OP picks, well, you need to have a good answer for that as well.
Yeah, and going back to the point I was making, I think G2, you said, okay, we don't think Mbessa is a high-profile pick, because as long as we have the answer in the Warwick, this champion goes down in the priority. So they were playing with that in mind, and I think that really shows how far ahead they are right now, that they have these answers to what other people deem as very, very strong.
Yeah, it makes sense. This is their second draft versus GX. I think they just got Warwicked, right? And then the Warwick is kind of off the table, but then it's in your mind. Like, they can do anything over there in that top lane. What did you think about these two sides in this game too, in terms of balance in draft?
I look at Mel and I wonder, what is Mel actually going to reflect?
Yeah, and
I mean, there is a Maokai ult coming that you can reflect.
It's
but
one of them, right?
Yeah. But
where it is
there's not
interesting.
that much for this Mel to reflect. Because when I think of Mel, I think of her W that obviously reflects any projectile coming her way. And to me, it's kind of like when you play Sylas, you want to have good ults.
Yeah.
When you play Mel, you want to have good reflects.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a champion you can just pick like this early game, because then, as you see, G2 don't give in to the Mel. They don't pick anything that the Mel is going to reflect well. And I think really clever by G2 to actually give them the Mel and just say, okay, we're going to play Aurora. What can you do?
They managed to bait GX into picking Mel and Skarner early and not being able to do anything with the champions.
Yeah.
I love their prep.
I think
love their prep.
it's one of the differences between teams that are comfortable being reactive in terms of the champions pools that they can field and the view that they have about how they can counter the enemy comp on the fly. And the teams, I feel, that maybe have this set idea of comps in their head before they get into the draft of what they want to play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is why G2 has set themselves apart, because they exactly had that. And I think like you've had a week now as a team where you're like, we're still on 25.s, whatever, it's the third one, right? So we are still on that patch. You've had your time to actually then go through what was our priority. What have we learned perhaps from other teams who's got these picks ready? Are we willing to experiment ourselves? And I'm really hoping that we'll see that, especially from the likes of GX, for example, who were willing to experiment with Avril in the bot lane, or Jackies, who used to play a lot of Yone when it wasn't always the most flavored pick. It obviously became later. But yeah, I'm really hoping we see more flexibility from some of our teams.
I'm lucky hoping we don't, because when you think, and I'm sorry, but like when you think about it, you're in the lower brackets. I wouldn't take risks being a lot of those teams today, given the lack of fundamentals they have. You have the ability to be able to keep it simple. Just do it.
Just do it, okay?
Just do it.
But I also feel like that there's that if you're like, sure, the Team Heretics draft, we probably all remember with the
Yasuo?
Yone and
Oh my
Yasuo
God.
and topside, and that's very difficult. But I think if you're more calculated in your approach with that creative pick, that's where you really find the strength of being innovative.
But that's why I don't trust our teams, GB.
Okay,
I trust them, I trust them, they'll
these
do it.
opponents, though, like last week,
Yeah.
maybe they were outmatched. They should be more evenly matched this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm a calculated draft maker and I'm going into BDS versus Vitality, I'm picking champions that can fight, because that's what we're going to be getting. I think you should draft to the team you're playing, and I think if you're BDS and Vitality, you know there's going to be fights. So give your players tools to take these river skirmishes. Don't pick champions that hug their towers and wait for 40 minutes, because your players won't be able to hold back anyway. You're not going to trust Hylissang to play Yumi and you sit behind his AD carry.
It's like you're in a
Maybe.
1v1.
What are you implying?
Just hiding under the turret with the snowball, I remember you.
Yeah, and can you tell the viewers what the final tally was?
Yeah, we played
I mean,
1v1.
if we just talk about that one game I won,
No, it
then
was like
that's a
8-1
perfect set.
8-1, yeah, 8-1 is correct.
Yeah, it was. In any case, talking about the players and the draft, Lord did have a chance earlier to catch up with Shayak and Nuke at the Marriott Bonvoy checkpoint in the pregame check-in. Check.
Thank you, Shox. Laure here for the Marriott Bonvoy pregame check-in with Nuke. Thank you for joining me ahead of today's series. Let's talk about what happened last week. The plan you came with was a hard-to-execute composition in Game 1, more agency in Game 2. How do you reflect on your prep, the execution maybe, and why things didn't work?
I mean, I think the prep was fine. I mean, like Game 1, we just needed to play better on like our windows, on like all the little stuff that actually matters in the game. We should have done it better than enemy.
Yeah.
It was Game 1, we like just got outclassed in our game.
Yeah.
So after it was really hard to play. But Game 2, we had a more straightforward draft. With more urgency. We were in a really, really good spot in the game. And yeah, like mid-game fight and mid-game gestion of how we want to progress the map was not great at all. And we just gave and gave again and again. So.
Yeah, and it makes me really frustrated watching BDS's game, so I cannot even imagine how it is for a player, but I want to follow up on this aspect. Sometimes you're going to have the lead, you're going to have tempo, and then I just don't know what happens, Nuke. Is it a discipline problem? Is it a communication problem? What do you attribute this to?
I think there's a lot of, right, like it's obvious, like there is issues in the team, right? I don't think it's about, like, discipline would matter. I think if you actually, like, as a team, you understand the map and how to play together. I think together it's been hard to be on the same page, try to do the same thing together, move together, this type of stuff. So, like, I would not call this discipline, but more of like just the applicable knowledge as 5, right? So.
All right. I hope this can come together today in
so.
this elimination series. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Nuke. Best of luck against Vitality. Shayek, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
This is the loser bracket, but I feel like this is your first playoffs, and we saw a video from Hilly-sang and Pad actually last week who were saying that there's been a lot of mistakes, but everyone is taking ownership of what happened against KC. Coaches first timing Fearless Draft as well. So tell me about last week, the results versus KC, and why do you think it went this way?
I think apart from the fact that we lost 0-2 to them, I think we showed, especially in the game 2, pretty good League of Legends. I think we made a lot of unnecessary mistakes that I believe will not happen today.
Right.
So I think I'm pretty confident that we're going to win 2-0 against BDS today.
What is going to be different and that lets you know that it's not going to happen again, especially in an elimination series here?
I think we are more aware of the basics that were missing from the last week, especially tempo resets. We were making so many mistakes in that regard. Which made our map completely unplayable. And I think we're gonna fix it for today's series, and it's gonna be much easier.
Focusing on this, I feel like it's not an easy spot for you to be in, being a rookie or younger player, very first playoffs. How do you make sure that you're gonna stay focused, that you don't let yourself be affected by anything outside of the game?
I think I won't really stress. Like, I usually don't stress that much before the series, especially when I know the opponents who I already played against in the past, because I remember screaming against all of these people in the past, so I'm not really like afraid of them.
All right. Everything is in control.
Yeah.
Wishing good luck to Vitality today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Sharks, back to you.
Thank you. Very, very confident. I love to see it. I think it does deserve a call out, kind of. I've been really inspired by the rookies on Vitality. I think you cannot say it's their fault that Vitality kind of loses the games they lose, right? It's obviously, there's more going on there, and they definitely can hold their own.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take a look at the entire map, if you're looking at a laning phase, sometimes they're more, majority of the time, they're more consistent than Kanzi and Hilly-sang, right? So I think the rookies have been doing a phenomenal job. I've been really impressed with Naknako. I think Chayek as well had a solo kill last week as well. So I actually think the rookies has been doing a phenomenal job.
They have. He's talking there about tempo resets. Feels like it's a hard thing to fix, especially when you have kind of a loose cannon team like Vitality.
I think it's the fact, and this is why I love watching Vitality, they're always willing to go for the outplay, right? So most teams, if they're practice, their coach, they'll tell you, you know what, we should just press B right now. We've got the wave crashed in, we had a good play, now we can just set up for wherever's the next objective we want to go for. But Vitality feels like they're having that conversation is, what if we stayed? What if we went for a fight here? What if we tried it? It's a 50-50, good odds.
Hilly isn't having that conversation.
I mean, it's
He's
not
already
only
in the
just
enemy
Hilly,
jungle.
I think it's Kasi as well. I think they're happy about these situations. And that's why they're so funny, because they will take the play that other teams won't, and that'll crash and burn for them sometimes, but often, other times as well, it'll look insane.
Apparently, it'll be more measured today. We'll see. So let's talk about BDS just a little bit. We had some insight from Nuke as well, but sometimes I feel like those mid-game issues, they keep plaguing them for a team that, in my opinion, if you look at the back end, always wants to be pretty well drilled, right? In terms of the right decisions that are made in game. But a lot of new members who have a wild card, of course, and 1-1-3, of course, so...
But I think you're right on the money, actually. I think BDS is a team that, you know, last year, it used to be their bread and butter, specifically the team fights around the objective and the setup they had around it. Right now, it feels random at times. You're starting up Nashor for no reason other than we don't know what to do. They feel desperate, and it sucks for a team that was so consistently top 3. Winter playoffs, 3rd place. Spring playoffs, 3rd place. Summer playoffs, 3rd place. They were the gatekeepers. And for a team that was in control of the offseason and built this roster with what they, in their own really choice here, it's not looking good for them. I want to see more. I want to see a team that's controlled specifically around the objective.
Yeah, this is the lower bracket, but you say it all there. I think this team had a certain identity, but the players don't necessarily dance to that tune, right? You also, if you have a support with less reps, the fact that some of the most important synergies in the game include the support. I think it's natural that we cannot kind of emulate that one for one. But what's your gut feeling for this elimination best of 3 for BDS against Vitality?
Well, I gotta say, despite Vitality's loss, I still saw more better moments from them in their loss against the KC than I saw with BDS loss. BDS, once again, as I said earlier, it just felt so desperate, whereas at least Vitality, that was live, and I saw some ideas with it. I think, like, with a higher peak right now, I see Vitality having the edge, actually.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Well, some players, they follow the rules, and some, well, they throw the rulebook straight into the fountain. Last week, 2 of the LEC's most fearless players have been leaving chaos in their wake, making plays no sane player would dare attempt. Who are these criminals of the Rift? Detective Nymera and Specialist Finn are on the case. Welcome to Summoner City, where the rule breakers run free.
Well, this crime scene doesn't make any sense. No one plays like this in Summoner City. Oh, there are rules, goddammit. Oh, Finn. It's good you're here. There are rule breakers loose in Summoner City. People who don't play normal, they don't play by the rules, and it's getting folks scared. If we don't catch them, the city might never be the same.
You couldn't have called it a better time. I'm hot on the trail of 2 rule breakers who are still at large and must be found immediately. Detective, status please.
Well, as I was saying, it doesn't make any sense. You see, it's almost as if with this single set of footprints, a jungler has approached the objective and tried to take it like that. It's like you're throwing away the objective.
No pushing lanes. That's the trademark of an old colleague of mine, Dogukan Balchi. Infamous for having the highest usage of emotes in a single game. 113.
You mean 113?
113!
Right.
Here we see him starting a dragon without any priority in either of his solo laners. And it is an easy job for LEC to come in and sneak it off his hands. Clearly he wants to run away, but he's also baiting in his associates to die with him. Or for him, even.
But this isn't how you play League of Legends. It's not how you play objectives. Surely he can't win objective fights like that.
113 is a man of deception. He might have been robbed of that dragon, but I remember one time he was walking up against 4 people with only 3, a numbers disadvantage.
My God.
Creating a numbers disadvantage fight, enemies pouncing on him, but then his backup comes in, his accomplices show up, and they win the fight anyway.
By God, maybe he really is a genius. He breaks all the rules of objectives altogether. But, Finn, you said you were chasing 2 rule breakers. This is only one of them. Who's the other?
Oh yes. And not any rule breaker either, but the rule breaker. 113 is nothing but a rookie to the silver, no, challenger Fox. Don Hylissang.
No, the professor himself say it isn't true.
That's what I'm afraid of. Last week disappeared in my office. It was the strangest thing. Here we see Don Hylissang walking up on mid lane against the rookie Kalist, engaging on him and outplaying them completely.
By God.
And this is not all. You would think a man like Don Hylissang would escape the crime scene safely with his life at hand, but no, he goes for more. He's looking for more, never satisfied. Unending hunger, never to be complete.
It's like he's always calling a bluff. You'll never know when he's breaking the rules or not. I've never seen such genius and madness rolled into one.
That's what makes him so dangerous. One thing is for certain, if these 2 keep breaking rules, a calamity is unavoidable.
Feels like we're so close to catching these rule breakers.
Well, that's got to be them. We have to hurry. If we do not stop them now, no one will be safe.